You think they respect you. They don't. They respect the version of you that learned to make them comfortable. And every time you swallow what you really think to keep that version intact, you don't become more likable. You disappear a little more. Here is the thing no one told you about being the agreeable, capable, dependable man everyone counts on. The more they approve of you, the less of you is actually there. So start by putting down the thing you've been carrying for years. You think the part of you that craves approval is a weakness, a flaw in the wiring, something a stronger man wouldn't have. So you fight it, hide it, despise it quietly. That contempt has never once made it smaller. Here is the truth. The approval-seeking self is not a defect. It is a structure. You built it, deliberately, the way an engineer builds a bridge to carry a specific load. And it carried you. It got you accepted when acceptance was not guaranteed. It got you praised, promoted, trusted, chosen. It worked. That is precisely the problem. We do not become enslaved to the things that fail us. We become enslaved to the things that work, because success is the most convincing argument there is, and a strategy that keeps paying off never gets questioned. It just keeps running, and now it is running you. The thing you built to serve you has quietly taken the chair. It answers before you do. It decides what you say in the meeting, what you post, what you laugh at, what you let slide, who you become in a room before you have consciously chosen anything at all. You think you are making decisions. Often you are only watching a machine execute the program it was given, and reporting the output as if it were your will. So, this is not going to be a lecture about confidence. You don't have a confidence problem. You have an identity problem. A question of which thing inside you is actually holding the pen. To answer it, you need the man who understood this mechanism better than anyone before or since. You need Carl Jung. Jung gave this constructed self a name, and the name is exact. He called it the persona. The word is old. It comes from the Latin for the mask an actor wore on a stage. Carved face he held up so the audience in the back row could read who he was supposed to be. Jung chose that word on purpose because that is what this part of you is. It is the face you turn to the world. He defined it with a precision worth slowing down for. The persona, Jung wrote, is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and, on the other, to conceal the true nature of the individual. Read that twice. To make an impression, and to conceal. Those are the two jobs of the mask, and you have been running both at once for so long they feel like a single act. Now, here is where almost everyone gets Jung wrong, and where, if you take nothing else, take this. Jung did not say the mask was bad. He never told anyone to tear it off and walk through the world raw and unguarded. He called the persona a compromise between individual and society as to what a man should appear to be, and he meant compromise as a necessary thing. You need this. The disciplined founder, the steady professional, the man who does not bleed his every anxiety onto the people depending on him. That is the persona doing honest work. It is how you adapt. It is how anything gets built at all. The mask was never the enemy. Say that again until it lands, because the entire rest of this depends on it. The problem is not that you have a face you show the world. The problem is what happens when you forget there was ever a difference between that face and your own. The problem is mistaking the mask for the man. And that failure, a persona that has swallowed its owner whole, is the false self. You should know how it got built, because no one chooses this on purpose. And the day it began, you were too young to have any say. You were a boy, and you ran an experiment without ever knowing it was an experiment. You watched. You watched the face of the person whose love you needed most, and you learned to read the weather there. You noticed, not in words, you didn't have words yet, that some versions of you brought warmth and some brought cold. When you were loud and the room went tight, you got quieter. When you achieved and the eyes lit up, you filed that away. This is the currency. This is what gets me in. Maybe it was a grade brought home. Maybe it was the day you cried and were told men don't, and you felt the temperature in the room drop, and some part of you, fast, frightened, and very smart, decided never to do that again. That was not weakness. Understand that. That was a child doing the most intelligent thing a child can do, surviving the only environment he was given, by becoming the shape that environment rewarded. You optimized. You found the configuration that maximized safety and minimized pain, and you ran it, and it worked, and because it worked, you ran it again the next day, and the next, for thousands of days, until the strategy stopped feeling like a strategy and started feeling like you. This is the part Jung saw so clearly. The persona is not a lie you decide to tell, a lie you can stop telling. This is something that calcified, a survival response that hardened slowly into an identity, so gradually that there was never a moment you could point to and say, "There, that is where I started performing." There was no line. There was only a boy who learned what got him love, becoming a man who is still, decades later, performing for a room that emptied out long ago. The faces he is trying to please aren't even there anymore. He just never put the mask down. 'Cause here is the turn. Here is where the necessary thing becomes the cage. There was a time you took the mask off. You walked through your own door, and the public face came down, and there was someone underneath. Someone with unguarded wants and unsorted thoughts and feelings that hadn't been checked against anyone's approval yet. Then, somewhere along the way, the mask stopped coming off. You got home and kept wearing it. You performed for your partner. You performed in the empty apartment. You started performing inside your own head, narrating your life to an invisible audience, rehearsing how things would look before you had even decided how they would feel. Jung had a phrase for this exact failure: identification with the persona. The ego, the part of you that says "I," stops standing behind the mask and fuses with it. It stops wearing the role and becomes the role. Jung put it plainly: the danger is that a man becomes identical with his persona. The professor with his textbook, the tenor with his voice. The function eats the man. His warning about the price was unflinching. A man cannot get rid of himself in favor of an artificial personality without punishment. You feel that punishment in a specific, daily way. Someone asks what you want, where to eat, what to do this weekend, what you actually think about the thing everyone else has already had opinions on, and you reach inside for the answer and find a strange blank silence. Not because you have no preferences, because every preference you have ever had got routed automatically through a single checkpoint before it reached you. Will this be approved of? The filter runs so fast and so early that you never see the raw signal. You only get the pre-cleared version, the answer already trimmed to be acceptable. You have lost the ability to tell what you want from what you are supposed to want. That is the false self, fully seated, holding the pen. And it costs you. Let me name the first cost, because you have felt it and probably never had language for it. Hit the goal. The real one. The number, the title, the launch. The thing you told yourself would finally feel like a rival. And you stood there in the moment you had bled for and felt nothing. A flatness where the triumph should have been. You assumed something was wrong with you, some defect of gratitude. So you went looking for the next goal, certain the feeling was just one rung higher, and you climbed, and the same nothing met you at the top. Here is the mechanism, and it is not mysterious once you see it. The goal was never yours. It was theirs. You chose it because of how it would read, who would be impressed, what it would prove to the people whose approval the mask was built to win. So, when you finally got there, the applause did exactly what applause does. It landed on the mask. It struck the surface you had built for it to strike, and it never once reached the man underneath, because the man underneath was not the one being praised. The performance was being praised, and a performance cannot feel proud of itself. This is what Jung meant about sourcing your worth from outside. When your sense of value is anchored in the crowd's reaction, the nod, the metric, the like, the raise, it can never fill you, structurally, no matter how much arrives, not because you got too little, because it is aimed at the wrong target. The approval is for the act, and you are not the act. So you stay hungry, and you mistake the hunger for ambition, and you build a whole life on top of an emptiness you keep trying to out-earn. Win feels hollow because it is. It was never coming home to you. There is a second cost, quieter and uglier, and you will recognize it if you are honest. The man who lives for approval keeps a ledger. He does not mean to, but underneath all that giving, the favors done, the opinions softened, the times he stayed agreeable when something in him wanted to push back, tally is running. You gave and you gave and you bent and you stayed easy to be around, and somewhere a part of you has been writing it all down, expecting the debt to be paid. And it never is, because you never told anyone the debt existed. So the bill goes unpaid, and the resentment grows. Toward your partner, your colleagues, your friends, the very people you perform for. You begin, in a way you would be ashamed to admit out loud, to resent them for a cage you built and locked from the inside. This is the shadow, and it is the most important thing Jung ever found. Everything you suppress to keep the mask clean does not disappear. The anger you swallowed to stay likable, the no you turned into a yes, the truth you filed down so no one would flinch. None of it evaporated. Jung was emphatic on this point. What is repressed does not vanish. It goes underground. It pools in the dark beneath your awareness, and there, unwatched, it turns toxic. It comes back as the cold remark you didn't plan. The contempt that leaks out sideways. The disproportionate fury at some small thing, which was never about the small thing. You think you have been managing all this by keeping the surface pleasant. You have only been pressurizing it. The nice man and the bitter man are the same man, and the bitterness is the exact size of everything the niceness refused to say. Stay with me, because we are about to turn from the diagnosis toward the way out. What comes next is the part most men never reach. This channel is for that man, the one doing the harder work. Not the work of becoming more liked, but the work of becoming whole. There is a great deal of noise out there telling you to optimize the mask, polish the image, win the room. Almost none of it will tell you the room was never the point. So, if you are building something real, and you intend to still recognize the man who built it when it's finished, subscribe. Let the next piece of this find you when you need it. Then, come back here, because we have arrived at the only question that matters. Follow the logic all the way down, past the hollow winds and the buried resentment, to where it actually ends. Because a life runs on these choices, and a life is a long time. Career chosen for how it sounds when you say it at a table. A partner chosen in part for how the pairing photographs. For the version of you it confirms to everyone watching. Opinions you didn't reason your way into, but absorbed, because they were the price of belonging to the group you wanted to belong to. Each of those, on its own, looked like a reasonable adult decision. Stack them across 20 years, and they become a life. One ordinary morning, somewhere around 40, you wake up inside it and feel, with a quiet horror you can't say to anyone, that it belongs to someone else. It looks right. It photographs beautifully. And it fits you like a borrowed coat. Now, here is the lie you will reach for to make that bearable. And you must refuse it. You will tell yourself this is maturity. That wanting your own life was a young man's selfishness, and laying it down for everyone else is humility, is service, is what it means to grow up. Jung's logic runs the other way. The more perfectly you fit their expectations, the less of you is left to fit anything at all. Maximal adaptation to the crowd is minimal adaptation to your own nature. This was never humility. Humility knows what it is and chooses to serve. This is something else. This is the slow abandonment of the self, and you cannot do it, Jung warned, without punishment. The life that isn't yours sends the bill, every day, in a currency of quiet dread you have learned to call normal. So, what is the answer? Jung gave it one word, and he spent his life on it: individuation. Hear what it means, plainly. Individuation is the work of becoming who you actually are underneath the inherited mask. It is gathering back the parts of yourself you exiled to win approval. Manda. The anger, the wants, the strange particular truths that didn't fit the role. Making them part of you again, instead of leaving them buried where they rot. Jung defined it as becoming one's own self, and called it coming to selfhood. Not inventing a self. Coming to the one that was always there, waiting under the wrappings. Now hear what it is not, because two counterfeits will rush in to impersonate it, and both will wreck you. The first is the edgelord, the man who hears "stop seeking approval," and decides the answer is to stop caring about people altogether. Burns his bridges, calls the wreckage freedom, mistakes being alone for being whole. That is not individuation. Jung was explicit. Individuation does not cut you off from the world. It gathers the world to you. The man who needs no one's approval is also, quietly, capable of real connection for the first time, because he is no longer using people as mirrors. The second counterfeit is subtler and more tempting. The man who decides authenticity means saying every cruel thing that crosses his mind and calling it honesty. That is not the true self emerging. That is just the shadow grabbing the wheel. The same performance, inverted. Rudeness is a mask too. Jung's aim was never to swap a polished mask for a brutal one. His aim was wholeness. And as he wrote, life calls not for perfection, but for completeness. Completeness includes the parts that win no applause and the parts that are genuinely kind. Not a better performance, not its angry opposite, a whole man. So what do you actually do? This is not a feeling you wait for. It's a practice, and like anything you have ever built, it is built in repetitions. Start by catching the filter in the act. The next time someone asks what you think, notice the half-second before you answer. The silent checkpoint where the raw response gets routed through, what will this person want to hear? Just see it running. You cannot disidentify from a machine you can't see operating, and the moment you can watch the pre-filter work, you are already standing slightly behind it. Which is to say slightly behind the mask, which is the whole game. Then ask the question underneath. Before I check who's watching, what do I actually think? Then run small reps of disapproval. Deliberately. Voice the unpopular take in the meeting, quietly, without heat. Decline the invitation you would normally accept on reflex. Say the honest no you would usually dress up as a yes. Keep them small on purpose. You're not trying to blow up your life. You are training a muscle that has not been loaded in decades, and a muscle is loaded in increments. Each small act of surviving someone's mild displeasure teaches the frightened boy still running the program that disapproval is not death. He genuinely does not know that yet. You have to show him and build the internal verdict. Before the day begins, settle in your own mind what would make it good. By your standard. The work you'd respect. The way you'd want to have shown up. Decide that before anyone weighs in. Then, when the feedback comes, the praise and the criticism both land on a man who has already rendered judgment, instead of a man waiting outside the courtroom to be told what he's worth. This is what it means to move your center of gravity from the persona to the self. The day's verdict is yours to give before the crowd ever votes. Won't sell you this cheap, because cheap advice gets men hurt. There is a price, and you should know its exact size before you pay it. Some of the people in your life only ever loved the mask. They did not love you because they never met you. They met the agreeable, accommodating, always available version, and that version was the whole basis of the bond. When you stop performing it, when the real man steps forward with his own no and his own edges, some of them will leave. Not all, but some. And that loss is real, and it will hurt in a way no reframe can talk you out of, and I'm not going to insult you by pretending otherwise. But understand what the loss actually is. You did not lose a relationship. You discovered there was never one there. Only an arrangement in which you performed and they approved, transacting forever, neither of you ever fully present. What feels like losing them is just the bill coming due for connections that were never built on you in the first place. This is the toll, not the tragedy. Every authentic self costs you the approval of everyone who only wanted the performance. And in the same motion, with the same act, it buys you the only relationships that were ever real. The ones with people who turn out to prefer the man to the mask, who exhale when you finally stop performing, because they were waiting for him too. You cannot get those without paying this. The ones who stay are yours now in a way they never could have been before. And now the turn that earns everything, the one the loud voices always miss. Because by now, you might think the goal is to destroy the mask, to get free of the persona once and for all and stand bare before the world. It is not. That was never Jung's instruction, and getting this wrong will only build you a new cage in the shape of false freedom. You do not kill the persona. You demote it. Jung's words were precise. The aim is to divest the self of the false wrappings of the persona, not to go skinless. To loosen the death grip, to strip away the part that was running the show, while keeping the mask itself, because the mask is useful and you will need it. You keep it for the boardroom. You keep it for the difficult dinner, the negotiation, the moment that calls for the steady professional and not your every unfiltered feeling. The persona stays in your hands as what it always should have been. A tool, an instrument you pick up when it serves and set down when it doesn't. The whole difference, the entire distance between bondage and mastery, is one question. Who is holding it? The false self is a mask wearing a man. Mastery is a man wearing a mask, and knowing every second that it is a mask, that he is the one who put it on, that he can take it off, that he is not the carved wooden face, but the living thing behind it, that chose to lift it. Jung never asked you to be faceless. He asked you to exist behind the face. The false self does not die when you throw the mask away. It dies the instant you remember you are the one holding it. So, stop begging for their approval, not because you've decided to stop caring about people. The man who stops caring has only traded one prison for a colder one. Stop because of what the begging was costing you, quietly, the whole time. It wasn't costing you dignity or status or any of the things you thought you were protecting. It was costing you the one person you can never go back and get. The one underneath. The man who was forming his own thoughts and wanting his own wants before he learned to check the room first, and who has been waiting, patient and unmet, behind a face you forgot you were wearing. He is still there. That is the thing the emptiness has been trying to tell you all along. Not that you are broken, but that someone real is buried, and the part of you that aches is the part of you that knows it. Everything Jung pointed at comes down to a single, simple, terrifying act. Set the mask down. Not forever. You'll need it again tomorrow, and that's fine, that's the point. Just for an hour. Set it down where no one is watching and no verdict is coming, and sit with whatever is left when there's no one to perform for. That quiet thing that remains, with nothing to prove and no one to win, that is you. That was always you. Go and meet him. He has been waiting a very long time.